Well, thank you, Michael, and thanks to everybody for joining. I want to extend a warm welcome to Nadine, the featured panelist, and the attendees participating in today's event. Panel briefings like these play a critical role in highlighting human rights abuses for Congress and providing a platform for experts to share ideas and solutions. I'm honored to co-chair the bipartisan Human Rights Caucus with my good friend, Senator Coons, who I understand couldn't be with us today, but since becoming involved with the Senate Human Rights Caucus shortly after I was sworn in 2015, we've held briefings on a wide range of issues, and I think it's helped promote individual actions in support of human rights by numerous senators. I was proud to join Senator Coons in March to introduce SR 80, which aims to establish a Senate Human Rights Commission to replace the caucus. The Senate Human Rights Commission would serve as a counterpart to the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission and enhance the Senate's ability to understand and respond to global human rights issues. The caucus organized this panelist briefing today to discuss illiberal policies and democratic backsliding occurring in Turkey. Turkey remains a U.S. ally, and it's strategically located in a very dangerous part of the world. However, the Turkish government has increasingly pursued policies that are contrary to America's democratic values and endanger American and NATO security interests. My experiences while traveling to Turkey to support Pastor Andrew Brunson allowed me to see the effect of illiberal Turkish policies firsthand. And Pastor Brunson's arbitrary arrest and imprisonment revealed Turkish government's blatant disregard for individual rights and the rule of law. If an innocent American pastor can be detained on trumped-up charges for 2 years, any average Turkish citizen can also be jailed for politically motivated reasons. Unfortunately, one does not have to reside within Turkey's borders to suffer from illiberal Turkish policies. Turkey has expanded efforts to kidnap or arrest dissidents abroad through nefarious means, including the abuse of Interpol red notices. This behavior puts Turkey in the same group as bad actors such as Russia, China, and Iran, who also undertake similar efforts. This illegal conduct inspired me to co-sponsor the TRAP Act, which Senator Wicker recently introduced, to require the U.S. government to counter Interpol abuse and to promote reform within Interpol. It is critical for the Turkish government to honor its own constitution and initiate policies that rein in government overreach and respect fundamental human rights of Turkish citizens. As a NATO ally of Turkey, the United States must increase efforts to encourage Turkish leaders to see the light and reject authoritarian policies our adversaries, Russia and China, are trying to export around the world. I'm glad the caucus is dedicating this briefing to discuss, or participating in this briefing to discuss human rights issues in Turkey. And I look forward to hearing your views and proposals put forth by the panelists today, and then acting on those proposals as we do everything we can to return to a more liberal, a more moderate Turkey. Thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to listening to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Senator. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Senate Human Rights Caucus briefing on the human rights situation in Turkey. And thank you, of course, to Senator Tillis and also to Senator Coons for convening today's event on this important topic, for your remarks, and for your obviously continued bipartisan leadership promoting human rights and religious freedom around the world. My name is Nadine Maenza, and I'm the chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, an independent bipartisan government agency that monitors freedom of religion or belief abroad and makes policy recommendations to the President, the Secretary of State, and Congress. I will begin with a short introduction of the topic we are addressing today, introduce our esteemed panelists for their remarks, and we look forward to having a lively and productive discussion. Human rights conditions in Turkey have continued to follow a troubling trajectory. In December, the country's parliament passed a law that increases government control over civil society through intensified oversight and new limitations on fundraising. Indeed, civil society is under constant pressure, and Osman Kavala is still wrongfully detained, despite the European Court of Human Rights calling for his release. On the political front, the former co-chair of the pro-Kurdish HDP party, Selahattin Demirtas, remains in pretrial detention, and prosecutors have filed a case with Turkey's highest court seeking his party's disbandment. He is also in the Defending Freedoms Project, for which the Senate Human Rights Caucus is an important partner and is currently advocated for by Representative Jamie Raskin in the House. Additionally, President Erdogan's ruling AKP party has threatened withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention for preventing and combating violence against women, and government officials frequently speak out against LGBTI people. Turkey also continues to rank as one of the top jailers of journalists in the world. Of course, the status of religious freedom in Turkey reflects the overall human rights crisis in the country. In its 2021 annual report, USCIRF recommended the U.S. Department of State to include Turkey on its special watch list. This recommendation was based on ongoing and systematic government restrictions on religious groups' ability to practice and to manage their own affairs, as well as the toleration of societal harassment and discrimination against religious minorities. Noteworthy examples of the Turkish government's discriminatory action or inaction this past year include President Erdogan's decree converting the Hagia Sophia back into a mosque, a move many denounced as symbolically hostile to religious minorities, the government's continued refusal to reopen the Greek Orthodox Keiki Seminary or reorganize Alevi gathering houses as places of worship, and the continued rejection of requests from religious minority communities for permission to hold board member elections. In the areas Turkey has invaded in northeast Syria, we see horrific conditions against religious and ethnic minorities, especially Yazidis, Kurds, and Christians. This continues to threaten not only religious freedom in the area they occupy, but the safety and the security of all the people that live there. So Senator Coons, Senator Tillis, and the Senate Human Rights Caucus have brought together an incredible panel to discuss these issues and more, and I will introduce our experts. Merve Tahiroglu is the Turkey Program Coordinator for the Project on Middle East Democracy. Diliman Abdulkader is a co-founder and spokesperson for the American Friends of Kurdistan. Dr. Aykan Erdemir is a Senior Director for the Turkey Program at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, FDD. And Dr. Suleyman Ozeren is an adjunct professor, faculty member at George Mason University. Merve, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you, Senator Tillis, and also Co-Chairman Coons for both having this event and for inviting me to speak at this panel, this very important panel. Turkey's human rights crisis is today at a level unprecedented in the 19 years that President Erdogan has ruled the country, according to Human Rights Watch. And I would like to focus my remarks here today on what this exactly means for Turkey's trajectory and why the United States must prioritize democratic values in its policy towards Turkey. Erdogan's blatant disregard for basic human rights is an alarming threat to Turkey's social and political stability. Under his rule, the Turkish government is leveling an abhorrent crackdown on Turkey's political opposition, independent media, and civil society, dismantling the fundamental building blocks of a stable democracy. Turkey's top opposition leaders, who combined together represent more than half of the electorate, faced constant harassment from a politicized judiciary, and Erdogan's almost total control of the media and periodic bans on protests leave these disgruntled citizens with very few outlets to express their frustration democratically. In a country that is as polarized along ethnic, religious, and political lines as Turkey, this is a recipe for social upheaval and civil strife. The most urgent issue, I would say, that could trigger such unrest is the government's effort to shut down the HDP, which is Turkey's second largest opposition party. For years now, authorities have been jailing the party's duly elected lawmakers and mayors without just cause or due process, in effect disenfranchising millions of voters. Critically, a majority of the HDP's voters are Kurds, Turkey's largest ethnic minority, and for the last 40 years, Turkey has been engaged in a deadly war with Kurdish militants, a war that bitterly divides Turkish and Kurdish citizens. And Erdogan's assaults on the HDP only fuel this polarization and severely damage prospects for peace. Another top concern for Washington, I believe, is Turkey's disregard for the rule of law at home and abroad. Erdogan's control of the judiciary not only makes everyone in Turkey, including American citizens like Pastor Andrew Brunson, vulnerable to arbitrary prosecutions. It also makes Turkey an irresponsible international actor. Today, Erdogan Erdogan's Turkey is only second to Putin's Russia in the number of cases it faces, for example, before the European Court of Human Rights. And despite Turkey's legal obligation to follow this court's decisions, it has been refusing to implement them, most prominently by failing to release this high-profile political detainee, civil society leader Osman Kavala, as Nadine mentioned, for now nearly 2 years. This is by no means the only example. Erdogan is leading Turkey to undermine key multilateral institutions that are designed to uphold a rules-based international order. And it's no coincidence that Turkey recently forced its NATO allies to water down a crucial joint statement condemning Belarusian dictator Lukashenko after he brazenly kidnapped a 26-year-old dissident from a Ryanair flight. What I'm trying to say here is that Erdogan's authoritarianism is not just a domestic issue. It is fundamentally changing Turkey's global orientation. The Turkish Republic has never been a full-fledged democracy, but for decades, it saw itself as part of a Western club of democracies and strived to be a responsible member of the international community. These features played a central role in turning Turkey into a US ally and remain a top reason why NATO still has a vested interest in keeping Turkey in its orbit. But the more Erdogan moves Turkey away from democratic values, the more Turkey undermines the alliance's core objectives. And for all these reasons, it is vital for Washington to make the promotion of human rights and democracy in Turkey a top priority. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. And now we're going to move next to Diliman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Tillis, and also Senator Coons' office and the Senate Human Rights Caucus for putting together this timely and necessary panel. Now, I know most of this conversation will focus on Turkey under Erdogan's regime, but I'll give you guys a Kurdish perspective. And the reality is that the Kurds have been suffering under the Turkish government long before Erdogan took power in 2002. It is crucial for the United States Congress, this administration, the American people, and our audience to understand the suffering of the Kurds in Turkey. In 1930, the Turkish Minister of Justice declared, "I won't hide my feelings. The Turk is the only lord, the only master of this country. Those who are not pure Turkish origin will only have one right in Turkey, the right to be servants and slaves." Today, there are an estimated 20+ million Kurds in Turkey, the country's largest ethnic minority. From 1923, since the founding of the Turkish Republic, to this day, the Kurds have lacked basic civil rights. Their right to identify as a Kurd, their right to speak freely in the Kurdish language, their right to speak freely, their right to wear traditional Kurdish clothing and colors, their right to education have all been targets for the Turkish government. If you sing in Kurdish or whistle a Kurdish tune, you're automatically deemed a terrorist in Turkey. If you're a Kurd in Turkey, you have no choice but to either stay silent or you'll be labeled a separatist and a terrorist. We know this is true not only because of the countless massacres against the Kurds in the southeast region, where thousands of Kurdish civilians have been killed, and where thousands of Kurdish civilian villages have been razed to the ground. We know this is true not only because of the erasing of the ancient Kurdish town, such as 12,000-year-old Hasan Keyf, with the intention of only wiping Kurdish history from the globe, but because even in the 21st century, the world witnessed as Erdogan purged the Kurdish population, linking them to the coup, and eradicated the only hope for Kurdish participation in Turkey's political sphere. For far too long, the international community called on the Kurds to put down their weapons and seek the non-violent route, even though the PKK did not take up arms until 1984. But the Kurds did put down their weapons. The Kurds under the People's Democratic Party, the HDP, united Turks and Kurds alike and won 80 seats in the Turkish parliament. Today, this party's leadership is imprisoned. The members of parliament have lost their immunity. They are again being targeted by the Turkish government. Whatever the routes the Kurds take, they become a target for the Kurdish government. As if the Turkish government did not have enough of targeting Kurds in Turkey, they waged a full-scale war on the Kurds in Syria in 2018 and 2019. Those same Kurds who fought the Islamic State and sacrificed thousands of lives on behalf of the world. And just last week, the Turkish government targeted a Mahmur refugee camp in Iraqi Kurdistan, killing 3 refugees. The Turkish government, especially Erdogan's regime, is not interested in a peaceful solution to the Kurdish question in Turkey. That is why I call on the 117th Congress and the Biden administration to encourage peace between the Turkish government and the PKK and take up the position of mediation. The Kurds have been and are ready for peace. The United States cannot stand idly by as Turkey abuses its NATO membership, use it as a shield in order to continue to imprison and kill Kurds across Kurdistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Diliman. That was really helpful, and I hope people are listening and taking notes today, because this is already such a good discussion. I do want to just say that we are taking questions from our audience. So if you'd like to type a question into the chat, the question portion of your screen, we would love to answer your questions as soon as we're done with our speakers. And Dr. Erdemir, it's time to hear from you. I think we're having trouble unmuting. Can you unmute?
No, I can't. No.
Great. Okay. There you go.
So thank you, Chair Maenza. I would like to begin by thanking the Senate Human Rights Caucus for holding this really timely and important panel. Thank you, co-chairs Tillis and Coons, for the great work you have been doing, not only on Turkey, but beyond Turkey. And also a special congratulations to Commissioner Nadine Maenza, who as of today is now the chair of USERV, and she is really a friend of Turkey and friend of all of Turkey's citizens, regardless of their faith. As a former Turkish lawmaker, I always begin a policy panel with this question. If I had a magic policy wand, what would I change first in Turkey to improve the country's human rights situation? And my answer to that would be that I would begin by restoring the rule of law and due process in Turkey, because I think in the short run, that would make the biggest impact on people's lives. But here I have to introduce a caveat about the word I used, restore, because that implies that Turkey had a functional rule of law and due process before the current erosion. But that would be a mistake, because Turkey's judicial system has always been imperfect. And Turkey's politicized courts have victimized generations of dissidents, Turks and Kurds, Muslims and Christians, Jews and atheists alike, women and men alike. Nevertheless, today, people who are victimized by the Erdogan courts, by the kangaroo courts, say that even military courts under military regimes in Turkey offered more due process and justice. And I think that is really a sad state of affairs, that in today's Turkey, people are saying that courts of juntas, military governments, used to treat them more fairly. And we really have to think about that today. And of course, related to the erosion of the rule of law and due process is the executive branch's increasing domination over the judiciary and the complete erosion of the separation of powers and checks and balances, which is at the root of this problem. So at this point, what we see is an increasing criminalization of any form of legitimate dissent, and this includes political, academic, and journalistic dissent. Here, we have to remember Turkey's Academics for Peace, thousands of bright academics who have petitioned the government for a peaceful resolution of the Kurdish conflict, and they have paid with their jobs, with their freedom, even with their passport. They have lost their freedom to travel, freedom to work, freedom to teach. And we owe them a great thanks. We also have to, and I know he has been mentioned before, but I have to reiterate, Osman Kavala, Turkey's secular saint, who has spent over 3 years now in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison for doing what every Turkish citizen should do. He has devoted his entire life, time, energy, and wealth to promoting pluralism, to restoring Turkey's minority heritage, to facilitating reconciliation between Turks and Kurds, Turks and Armenians, Muslims and Christians. And instead of being rewarded with the highest honor that Turkey can bestow upon an individual, he has been framed as a terrorist and is away from his family, but more important, he's away from all the great philanthropic work he could have done. So here, my concrete policy suggestion would be to use an effective human rights tool that not only the United States, but now also Canada and the European Union also have, and that is the global Magnitsky sanctions. Just like the United States used this tool to help free Pastor Andrew Brunson, I think it is time that the same instrument should be used to free Osman Kavala. And let me conclude my comments by focusing on another key issue in Turkey that is also linked to the rule of law, and that is minority rights and freedoms, or freedom of religion or belief. Turkey's minorities have been systematically discriminated against over the decades, but we have seen a particular spike since Turkey's failed coup attempt. We have seen scapegoating and intimidation of minorities. We have seen a spike in hate crimes, and worse, we have seen government-sanctioned hate speech targeting minorities, particularly a spike in anti-Christian and anti-Semitic hate speech. And here I would like to commend both the State Department and the Senate and House bipartisan task forces for combating anti-Semitism for their recent calling out of the Turkish president for his anti-Semitic comments. I think denying impunity in such cases and calling out hate speech, official hate speech, is extremely important. But I also, at this point, urge the State Department to follow USCIRF's recommendation in its latest annual report to designate Turkey as a special watch list country. You know, this is a recommendation that has been going on for quite some time, and the State Department, you know, seeing Turkey as a valuable NATO ally, has often decided to look the other way and appease Turkey. But that strategy has failed. Now we know that that is not a viable strategy. So maybe this time around, sending the right signal to Turkey could not only urge the government to do the right things, but also signal to Turkey's freedom-loving people that they're not alone and they have friends both in Europe and across the Atlantic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So interesting and such important information. I do understand we have Senator Coons with us now. Is that correct? And we'd love to. Wonderful. We're so glad that you're here. We would love to give you the opportunity, of course, to talk to our participants.
Thank you, Nadine. And I want to first, of course, thank my co-chair, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. Nadine, I hope he was able to join you at the outset. I've just concluded a call with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, so my apologies for not being with you right at 4 o'clock. Congratulations on being elected the chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner and now Chair Nadine Maenza, and to the panel, I hope, Aykan, Erdemir, that you had just concluded your comments, that I'm not interrupting. Aykan, and to the other panelists, I just appreciate what you're doing, the ways in which you're raising your voice, you're contributing to this conversation, you're helping reinforce the concern that so many of us feel about human rights in Turkey. The assault on the rule of law and on human rights in Turkey broadly in recent years has been deeply troubling as the authorities have reshaped public and state institutions to remove checks on power, as journalists and opposition politicians, civil society activists, and others have been routinely detained and prosecuted, often on trumped-up charges, either for their social media posts or accessing websites. I am concerned about the ways in which the current government has weakened, for example, bar associations, and that's accelerated Turkey's backsliding on human rights and the rule of law, because defense attorneys have those who've represented defendants in terrorism charges have faced prosecution on the same charges. as their clients. As you know, the relationship government to government has become quite strained, not just over Erdogan's decision to acquire the Russian S-400 missile system, but also our recognition of the Armenian genocide. President Biden, who has just met with President Erdogan in Europe, has made it clear that while our goal as a nation is to reinvigorate our alliances, that's a top priority, we also are determined to make sure that our values are at the forefront of his policy. As was just being said as I came on, often over recent decades by administrations of both parties. NATO ally Turkey and current strategic partner Turkey has often been given a pass when it came to questions about human rights, rule of law, civil society within Turkey. Turkey matters deeply for the region, for the world, and for how we stand up and speak for our values. Turkey matters in terms of what happens in Syria, in Iran, throughout the region. And I think we need to figure out the U.S.-Turkey relationship in a way that holds the Turkish government accountable for its own democratic commitments. I don't yet have a readout of the hour-and-a-half meeting that our president, President Biden, had yesterday in Brussels with President Erdogan. But I very much look forward to working with President Biden and senior members of his team to make sure that human rights continue to be at the forefront of our engagement with the world, and in particular, our engagement with Turkey. Last, my hope is that this is the Senate that will finally transform the Human Rights Caucus into a commission named for my friend and former colleague, Senator John McCain, with whom I traveled to so many different countries around the world, someone who unflinchingly stood up for and spoke up for human rights around the world. So thank you for allowing me to make some brief comments. I'm going to now put myself on mute and listen to much of the rest of the discussion. And I'm so grateful for the brave stances that so many of you on this panel today have taken as you've continued to advocate for human rights in Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator, to both you and Senator Tillis, for your commitment to human rights. I mean, it's so close to so many of our hearts, and it's wonderful to see such strong leadership. We are going to go to our last panelist. I'm excited to hear from Dr. Ozeren.
Thank you, Nadine. Co-Chairman Senator Coons and Co-Chairman Senator Tillis and distinguished members of the Senate Human Rights Caucus. It is an honor and pleasure for me to speak before you today about the developments, human rights developments in Turkey. Once a model for democratization in the Middle East, today Turkey is characterized by many as an authoritarian regime. Political and civil rights in the country have deteriorated so severely that, according to Freedom House, Turkey is no longer a free country. According to the International Press Institute, Turkey remains one of the world's biggest jailers of the journalists. Today, Turkey has seen the greatest decline in rank on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, dropping 32 spots since 2012. Turkish democracy began to decline as President Erdogan consolidated his power. Following the aborted coup in 2016, the AKP carried out a mass purge of the state institutions. The purge enabled the AKP to fill the positions with the loyalists. Today, the current state apparatus in Turkey appears to be a hybrid structure composed of state institutions and, in some cases, sort of hybrid or non-state actors embedded into the hybrid structure, including paramilitary groups and organized crime groups. The hybrid structure led to widespread corruption, making Turkey a safe haven for illicit businesses and organized crime. There has been almost 90% decrease in the number of organized crime and corruption operations. Public perception also reflects this fact. According to a recent survey, over 60% of the public believe that the mafia is protected in Turkey. Courts seem to be the extensions of the AKP regime. 97% of all prisoners convicted of terrorism charges in the Council of Europe member states are incarcerated in Turkey. Dozens of Kurdish politicians, including Demirtas, Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu, human rights defender Osman Kavala, Academics Nuriye Gulman, Sedat Lachiner, as well as dozens of journalists, academics, and intellectuals are still in prison. According to Human Rights Watch, since May 2016, Turkish intelligence has abducted at least 3,000 people at the heart of Turkey in Ankara and other cities. The demise of democracy and the absence of effective checks and balances system in Turkey not only led to human rights crisis within the country, but also contributed to regional instability. Just like the previous speakers have pointed out, Turkey has aligned with Russia and Iran and now China. Widespread allegations of human rights violations in the northern Syria and vast international transnational repression campaign around the world are two examples of such practices. According to the United Nations rapporteur, the Turkish government engages in state-sponsored extraterritorial abductions and forcible returns to Turkey. In fact, at least 100 Turkish nationals have been removed from several countries. More recently, Orhan İnandı, the founder and president of SPAD school networks in Kyrgyzstan, went missing in Bishkek. According to Freedom House, Turkey is most highly ranked country among those that have conducted renditions from host countries since 2014. The transnational repression also includes the abuse of Interpol rendition, Interpol diffusion and red notices mechanisms. While the AKP government has weaponized the definition of terrorism against dissident groups, the same government has seemingly ignored foreign fighters, jihadists, and members of organized crime. According to the International Crisis Group's report on Turkey, there are numerous examples of how the prosecutors and judges have shown leniency toward ISIS suspects during the trial procedures. This treatment is inconsistent with the treatment of thousands of individuals convicted of fictitious terrorism charges. Within the last 8 years, Turkish public prosecutors have filed more than 420,000 charges under the terrorism-related charges under the Turkish Penal Code. Facing international pressure, the AKP government has announced 2 judicial reform packages, and the European Commission, according to the European Commission, those packages failed to address key shortcomings regarding the independence of the judiciary in Turkey. Turkey is going through an economic and political downturn. The public support for the AKP is eroding. Turkey's domestic and foreign policy and its human rights practices have become so intertwined that any positive move toward improving human rights conditions requires a fundamental shift in the former. The United States and the European Union should have a common strategy regarding their relationship with Turkey. In any dealings with the AKP government, the message should be clear and persistent. The United States should take a zero-tolerance approach against human rights violations. And available tools, such as the Global Magnitsky Act, should be used as a targeted sanction mechanism against those who deliberately and consistently violate human rights. Thank you again for inviting me to this very important event, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. So interesting, and I'm already learning so much. I wanted to give the senators an opportunity if they would have a question. If not, we'll dive into some that have been submitted. Thanks.
I've been reviewing the chat list. I think there are a lot of very good questions that we can get to. And now that Senator Coons is on here, I know that he had another commitment. I'm glad to see him, but his commitment to the Human Rights Caucus and to the eventual commission that I hope we get done in this Congress is a top priority for us. Thank you all for joining, and thank you for your opening statements.
Great, thank you so much. I did want to ask one of the first questions. I know that, Merve, you had said about the meeting, the NATO meeting, the side meeting with President Biden and President Erdogan. at the Leader Summit, you had said that Washington expectations are low, but that Turkey's were high. And so I'm curious from you, and also if anyone else wanted to comment, if you think this meeting is going to have any impact on the bilateral relationship or the situation of fundamental rights in Turkey. Oh, do I need help? Okay, gotcha. I might need help with someone else unmuting you. I don't know, Michael, if you, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Sorry about that. It's Zoom etiquette. I keep muting myself. Unfortunately, from a human rights perspective, and we don't really know, we haven't seen the readout yet, so it's hard to say, but from a human rights perspective, I don't think the public the photo ops that came out of it were necessarily a positive step. If the U.S. goal is to make very clear to President Erdogan that, and I think it really, the message really should be coming from the U.S. that in order for the U.S.-Turkish relationship to improve, that Turkey not only needs to take some steps to improve some of the problems, security problems, such as with the S-400s issue, such as with the Eastern Mediterranean, which does seem to be improving that situation, but that those are not enough, that there also needs to be some concrete progress within Turkey and from the way Turkey is governed. I fully agree with Dr. Erdemir, my colleague, that rule of law is the top issue here, and unless we see some significant improvements, such as by Turkey complying with the European Court of Human Rights and other multilateral institutions that it is bound to, that it is itself connected itself to, and release people like Osman Kavala following those orders, that there will not be an improvement, concrete improvement in the U.S.-Turkish relationship. I think I do hope that in private, President Biden was able to convey that message, because so far the Biden administration has been really good in their public statements and their public messaging and emphasizing the importance of rule of law and democracy in Turkey. But we do think that these messages need to be complemented in private and come from all parts of the U.S. government, from the president, from the vice president, from the Secretary of State, from Congress, all the time, in order for the Turkish government, for President Erdogan to really get the message that this is a must, and that the U.S. does not only care about solving these other bilateral issues, which are very important, but also we need to see some concrete improvement within Turkey. So far in this meeting seems to have been a boon to President Erdogan at home. He got a lot of great pictures, all smiles, with President Biden out of this meeting. I think that's what he was going for. I think that was what he really wanted out of this summit, and he seems to have gotten it. So I'm, excited to read the White House readout of what was discussed, and I do hope to see some reference in there to human rights and democracy and rule of law. But what's most important is that there's a strong and unequivocal message coming from President Biden himself, again, the Vice President, the Secretary of State, everybody, all engagements with Congress, to Erdogan, that this is a must in order to improve U.S.-Turkish ties, because at the end of the day, that is what Erdogan really cares about, I think, to really put the relationship back on track, and for him to be able to understand that this is a key ingredient that he has to improve on. I think this message needs to come really strongly. So that would be my short commentary on what happened yesterday.
If any of the other panelists want to weigh in, if not, I'll jump to the next question.
If I may,
yeah, go ahead, Dr. Aykan.
Okay. So if I may add to it, I think it's really important to strengthen transatlantic action. When we take a look at Turkey's recent history, the United States has been most impactful when it acted in coordination with European allies. Turkey not only accepts the rulings of the European Court of Human Rights as binding, but also has been an integral part of the Council of Europe from the very start. And when we see a concerted action that involves both the United States and the European Union, as well as the Council of Europe, we see that successive Turkish governments were responsive. Yes, this is a unique moment. This is a unique moment that we have a Turkish government that is the least responsive to such international, messaging. And at the same time, it even fails to implement the binding rulings of the European Court of Human Rights. But ultimately, the only way forward is if we see more of this messaging and coming in a louder fashion and in a concerted fashion. Ultimately, as Turkey approaches a landmark parliamentary and presidential election in 2023, with almost all polls showing that the big tent opposition bloc is poised to win elections, just as it has done so back in the 2019 municipal elections. I think Turkey's pro-democracy citizens need to know that they're not alone, that they have allies, they have friends in the transatlantic world, and they will be coming to their aid, not only with messaging, but also by other forms of democracy and human rights advocacy and support. So I would also urge for enhancing existing projects to support human rights and democracy in Turkey, as well as media projects in Turkey. And here, a shout out to the Voice of America Turkish and Kurdish services, also BBC Turkish and Deutsche Welle Turkish, because those outlets are Turkish citizens' lifeline to real news in a country dominated by either Erdogan's media or by disinformation campaigns of Russian or Chinese sponsored media. So it's, I think, also very important that both Europe and the United States invest more in Turkish and Kurdish language services so that Turkish citizens have access to real reporting. Thank you.
Wow, very good. Yes. Senator, of course. Oh, he's mute. Okay, let's. Nope, okay.
I just wanted to say how much I respect and appreciate the input I've heard from this panel and how grateful I am for your leadership and your courage. And I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know the other panelists were hoping to weigh in.
If I may, I encourage, Senator Tillis' office, especially, and Senator Coons' office, and this Congress to pay attention that Turkey, and especially the administration, I hope they realize that Turkey is in a charm offensive, if you will.
Yes.
They got away with it all under the previous administration, and now they're trying to repair their actions with this administration because they know they are in a tougher position. And they are in a tougher position. They're in a deeper hole, largely because Erdogan put them there. It wasn't the United States' actions that put Turkey there. It wasn't the United States that forced Turkey to purchase S-400 missiles. And when we act, not just in messaging, but through sanctions, when we act on sanctions through the CAATSA sanctions, through its economy, and when we kick Turkey out of the F-35 program, Turkey restarted that charm offensive. So I encourage this administration to look at the whole laundry list of human rights violations by the Turkish regime, not simply the S-400 missiles, but the domestic grievances and the abuses of rule of law inside Turkey.
Great, thank you. Dr. Ozeren, did you want to add?
Yes, actually, I elaborate what has been already said. Erdogan feels most vulnerable at the domestic level, which pushes him toward, as Diliman said, to have a kind of charm offensive during the NATO summit. But I think he also kind of disappointed with his rapprochement to Russia, which has not paid what he has been expecting. So Erdogan knows very well that in Turkey now, there's an economic downturn. And he is in a very vulnerable situation in terms of his popularity. And now he's trying to do everything that he could And I think from human rights perspective, that this is an opportunity that should be seized by the United States to put pressure on him, not individually, but in terms of coming up with tangible packages, strategies to improve human rights and the rule of law, not just window dressing, a kind of pretending to be doing things that cannot produce what a real thing on the ground. That is why I think it's a very timely. We live in a very timely period that we could, and the United States could take advantage for the people in Turkey.
Great. Wow, thank you so much. We're going to go to another question. I know we have about 15 minutes, so we'll see if we can move quicker through a couple of questions. This is a tough one. Are you guys ready? Just warning you, I'm really excited to hear your responses and so glad to have your expertise. So this Turkish regime in particular, Erdogan, has been using terrorism to oppress the Kurds and every type of Kurdish activism. And this has been legalized according to the Turkish anti-terror law that considers all form of separatism, Kurdish national activism, as terrorism. The latter has been used to perpetrate flagrant crimes against Kurds inside Turkey and outside, which amounted to ethnic cleansing in some areas, such as in Syria. The U.S. administration and NATO governments designated the PKK based on no legal criteria but political. Is there a chance to bring to the floor of the U.S. Congress the matter of questioning the legality of designating the PKK as a terrorist organization?
I can start on that. With the question of the PKK, listen, we all know that the PKK has called for peace with the Turkish government countless of times, even most recently with the attacks in Iraqi Kurdistan. We know that the peaceful solution is the only solution to the Kurdish PKK, to the Kurdish Turkey conflict. The PKK is, Turkey has used NATO to push the United States into not resolving the PKK question. And unfortunately, the PKK has been designated since 1998, despite its pursuit of peace. But I encourage this Congress to look at the issue through the lens of the Taliban. We are approaching the Taliban in Afghanistan. We're creating a peaceful solution there with the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban as we withdraw troops by September. The Taliban has American lives on its hands. The Taliban has threatened America, the United States, Europe, U.S. soldiers, and our allies inside Afghanistan. The PKK has not threatened Americans. The PKK has not threatened the United States or Europe or its allies. The PKK's issue is it's an internal conflict between the Turkish government and the armed group itself. That's why it should be a much more, I don't want to use the word easier, but it should be a much more smoother path for the United States to play a mediator role between the PKK and the Turkish government into solving this crisis. Because the PKK is not at war with the world. The PKK is at armed conflict, internal armed conflict with the Turkish government only until it receives its rights. Of course, laying down arms is always the answer. But also we have to think about that the Kurds have to have their basic civil rights given to them by the Turkish government.
Sorry. Trying to speak. Sorry about that.
Yeah, actually, in 2009 and 2012, I was part of the team within the so-called resolution process. In fact, myself, we organized the very first Kurdish resolution process workshop, in 2009, and Bahçeli designated all of us as the 12 bad guys, at that time. I think the inherent problem here, the underlying problem here is democracy and the rule of law as a whole in Turkey. So if there would be any resolution in any form, it doesn't matter what form it is, but in any form, the precondition of any attempt to resolve this conflict has to start with democratization in Turkey in general. Otherwise, this is going to be another Erdogan's opportunity to make some time and to weather the conditions during the elections, just like he and his party have done so many times in the past.
Great, thank you. Anyone else, or should we move on? Okay, why don't I go to the next one unless someone wants to speak into that. I know, Dr. Erdemir, I was thinking of you with this next question, and certainly after you answer, anyone else on the panel is, of course, welcome to weigh in as well. President Erdogan and the Turkish government have been systematically persecuting the ecumenical patriarch and the Greek Orthodox minority in Turkey. The Turkish government has seized the property of the patriarch, refuses to recognize the international legal personality of the ecumenical patriarch, and continues to keep the Haki School of Theology closed, among other things. Last year, of course, we talked about how Turkey converted the Hagia Sophia. How can Turkey be held accountable, and should Turkey be labeled as a country of particular concern?
So I would like to answer this question at two different levels. On the one hand, this is part of an ongoing problem in Turkey when it comes to lack of freedom of religion or belief, particularly for Turkey's vulnerable minorities. And Turkey's Greek Orthodox community is definitely one of these vulnerable communities. You know, they have been victims of pogroms, for example, in 1955. The ecumenical patriarchate is always in the crosshairs of violent extremists. Their property has been confiscated. You know, the Halki seminary remains closed, and what this means is they can't really train their own clergy. But then beyond this domestic level, there is also a geopolitical level. And I think it's really important for the United States to pay attention to it. Because the ecumenical patriarchate is not in the crosshairs of Turkey's ultra-nationalists and Islamists, but also in the crosshairs of Putin and Russia. Because the Russian patriarchate and the Russian regime see the ecumenical patriarchate as a key obstacle to their hegemonic ambitions, religio-political hegemonic ambitions. And they see the expansion of the ecumenical patriarchate influence paralleling the expansion of NATO and democracy in the region. So this is really not only a crucial freedom of religion or belief issue and minority rights issue, but also a crucial geopolitical issue that concerns the future of rights and freedoms in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East and Caucasus. Hence, I think there needs to be a consistent reach out to the Turkish government to start tackling some of these issues, beginning with the low-hanging fruit. For example, there are absolutely no obstacles to returning the Halki seminary to the Greek Orthodox community to be used as the main theological school, or stop Ankara's meddling in not only the Greek Orthodox communities, but also the Armenian Apostolic communities' election of its faith leaders, as well as lay leadership. Because as we speak, election of board members to religious minority foundations is being blocked by Ankara on various legal pretexts. And when you add to this the denial of legal persona to the Ecumenical Patriarchate, to the Armenian Apostolic Church, to the Syriac Church, then you restrict these communities from enjoying their full property rights, but also from enjoying all the other legal avenues that would allow these communities to sustain themselves. And let me end by reminding everyone that the Greek Orthodox community today is below 1,700 members in Turkey. And a vast majority of the community is above the age of 60. So that the viability of the community itself is at risk. And I think the right to exist, the right to life is really the most fundamental of freedoms, meaning if you can't exist, you can't begin to enjoy your freedom of religion or belief. So I think this is an issue that really deserves greater attention and once again, concerted Euro-American action. Thank you.
Did any of the other panelists want to answer that question? No. Okay, I'm going to, we may only have time for one more question. I know, Dr. Ozeren, you've spoken about the international legal system several times, and so the disappearance of Orhan Anandi in Kurdistan has refocused attention on the Turkish government's efforts to illegally detain its citizens abroad, including abuse of Interpol red notices. What more can the international community do to prevent this type of behavior?
I think the international community should take these events very seriously. The problem here is when condemnations, follow these events, their effect is very limited. So I think there has to be some kind of international mechanism to be used as a deterrent against such countries. In my opinion, the Global Magnitsky Act, it is the U.S. Global Magnitsky Act, should become a global Magnitsky Act, not just for the United States, but I think the European Union should use that tool and embed that into the legal system within the European Union countries, and to target countries like Turkey if they continue these kinds of extraterritorial forcible returns and abductions. In terms of the Interpol, Interpol has different mechanisms to monitor requests. Turkey has been one of the most prolific abusers of Interpol mechanisms. One of the mechanisms, for example, the Commission for the Control of Interpol Files, monitor all of the requests, and if they comply with the constitution of the Interpol, then the request would be processed. The problem with the CCFs is that the human resources within this commission is limited. The financial resources are limited. I think Interpol should increase those resources. More importantly, in my opinion, I think a kind of external oversight committee or working group should be created to monitor these kinds of requests. Unfortunately and interestingly, the Interpol's next General Assembly is going to be in Istanbul in November of this year. And I think it is going to be held there. That's okay. But I think the international community and especially the United States should use this event as an opportunity to make sure that everyone knows that abuse of Interpol mechanisms, extraterritorial abductions are not going to be are going to be punished, are going to be sentenced and sanctioned by the United States and hopefully by the European Union.
Great, thank you so much. Did any of the other panelists want to add to that or have any final remarks before we close today? Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone as we're coming to 5 p.m. and just say what an excellent group of panels we had with such unique, each of you, expertise to contribute today. I wish we could have gotten to all these questions. And I just would recommend that those of you that care about conditions in Turkey, to highlight what's happening there. That's to tell the stories, to go on Twitter, social media, share articles, real information that's happening. People are suffering in Turkey, religious minorities, people just wanting to use their rights. Obviously, we know what's happening in Northeast Syria, where people, all sorts of atrocities are occurring in the areas that Turkey has invaded. And, so we're seeing airstrikes, and most people don't even know that Turkey is doing airstrikes right now all through Iraq. And so I would just recommend you guys to tell the story, speak the facts, and we really, again, thanks the Senate Human Rights Caucus for this opportunity and the senators for being willing to be leaders on such an important issue. So we're with the people of Turkey. Thank you so much again for joining. Oh, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.